Welcome to Warriors of the World, the channel where history's greatest figures come to life. Today, we invite you on an extraordinary journey into the life of one of humanity's most fascinating and controversial personalities, Napoleon Bonaparte. But before we dive in, take a moment to imagine this: early 19th century Europe, engulfed in the chaos of endless wars. Amid this storm, a young Corsican man emerges, small in stature but immense in ambition, ready to reshape the fate of entire continents. What made Napoleon so extraordinary? How did one man manage to alter history's course and leave a legacy that still resonates today? Napoleon Bonaparte was far more than a brilliant military leader. He was a political strategist, a charismatic figure, and, according to his enemies, an unstoppable genius with a thirst for global domination. Born in 1769 on the island of Corsica, his life began far from the centers of power. Yet, this young man quickly proved that noble birth was not a prerequisite for ascending to the heights of power. Educated in France, Napoleon stood out early on for his analytical mind and unshakable determination. In a Europe torn apart by the French Revolution's upheaval, Napoleon saw opportunity. With the cunning of history's most remarkable leaders, he navigated challenges and ascended the ranks of the French army. From an obscure officer, he transformed into the most feared and admired commander of his era. By the age of 24, he commanded entire armies. By 30, he was the most powerful man in France. But what was the secret to his success? His extraordinary intelligence, his ability to inspire unwavering loyalty in his troops, and his mastery of military strategy. Napoleon didn't just fight with weapons. He fought with ideas. Every decision he made was calculated, every battlefield maneuver a masterpiece. Yet, his rise wasn't solely about genius. It was also marked by controversy, betrayal, and an iron will that drove him to confront even the most powerful leaders of his time. Get ready, because in the coming chapters, we'll delve into not only his victories but also the darker sides of his insatiable ambition. Napoleon's story begins on the small mountainous island of Corsica, a territory annexed by France the very year of his birth. This fact profoundly shaped his character. Growing up, Napoleon listened to tales of his people's resistance against the French. Ironically, he would later become the ultimate symbol of French power. Though his family belonged to the minor nobility, they lived modestly. Carlo Bonaparte, his father, worked tirelessly as a lawyer to elevate the family's social standing. Thanks to his persistence, young Napoleon secured a scholarship to study in France, a pivotal moment that would change his life forever. Imagine a 9-year-old boy leaving his home in Ajaccio to venture into a foreign land where he barely understood the language. At the military academy in Brienne, Napoleon was a solitary and meticulous student. Reserved by nature, he nonetheless excelled academically. While others spent their time in leisure, he devoured books on history, mathematics, and military tactics. From a young age, he envisioned a life destined for greatness. His first major milestone came at 16 when he graduated as a second lieutenant of artillery in the French army. From that point, his fate was intertwined with gunpowder, cannons, and military strategy. Yet, even as a teenager, his writings and letters revealed an ambitious vision and an almost superhuman confidence in his ability to reshape the world. The early years of his career were anything but easy. In an army dominated by aristocratic officers, young Napoleon, a Corsican outsider, had to overcome prejudice and skepticism. But his brilliance and dedication soon caught the attention of his superiors. During his initial campaigns, his sharp analysis of terrain and knack for exploiting tactical advantages made him stand out. This chapter reveals the emergence of a leader shaped by discipline, ambition, and a strategic mind that would soon make him the most prominent figure of his time. But this is just the beginning. In the next chapter, we'll dive into his first victories and explore how Napoleon began building his legendary status. Napoleon Bonaparte first faced enemy fire as a leader during the siege of Toulon in 1793. This key southern French port was under the control of royalist forces and the British Navy. At a time when French generals seemed incapable of taking the city, the relatively unknown Napoleon proposed a bold and meticulous plan to reorganize the artillery. His approach combined mathematical precision with an intuitive grasp of the battlefield. The victory was overwhelming. Thanks to his strategy, the Republican forces captured Toulon, marking Napoleon's first major triumph. This success earned him a promotion to brigadier general at just 24 years old and drew the attention of revolutionary leaders in Paris. For Napoleon, however, this was merely the beginning. His hunger for glory and unshakable belief in achieving the impossible propelled him toward even greater challenges. Yet, Napoleon refused to let hardships overshadow his image as a hero. While in Egypt, he spearheaded a scientific expedition that included archaeologists, mathematicians, and engineers. This endeavor led to the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, a groundbreaking find that would eventually unlock the secrets of Egyptian hieroglyphs. For Napoleon, this blend of military conquest and cultural progress elevated his persona beyond that of a mere general. When Egypt became untenable, Napoleon made a controversial decision. He abandoned his army and secretly returned to France in 1799. Thanks to his control over the narrative of his achievements, he was welcomed as a hero. However, the Egyptian campaign had revealed both his brilliance and his limitations, setting the stage for an even more ambitious and perilous chapter in his career. In the next chapter, we'll explore how Napoleon transitioned from being a celebrated general to becoming the absolute leader of France, proving that his ambition knew no bounds. Returning to France in 1799, Napoleon found a nation in turmoil. The French Revolution had transformed society but left the country politically divided and economically strained. The Directory, the government that followed the revolution, was ineffective and losing popular support. This instability created the perfect environment for someone with Napoleon's audacity and vision to take charge. On November 9, 1799, Napoleon led a coup d'etat known as the 18th of Brumaire. Leveraging his popularity and the widespread dissatisfaction, he dismantled the Directory and established the Consulate, a new government led by 3 consuls. But everyone knew who truly held the reins of power: Napoleon, named first consul. With this move, Napoleon secured control over France. Yet his ambitions extended beyond mere governance. He implemented sweeping reforms to reshape the nation. Under his leadership, the administrative system was overhauled, the military reorganized, and the Napoleonic Code was established. This legal framework modernized French law and became a model for nations worldwide. On the battlefield, Napoleon continued to prove his unmatched military genius. In 1800, he led the French army to a decisive victory at the legendary Battle of Marengo against Austrian forces, solidifying his position as Europe's most powerful figure. This triumph reaffirmed French dominance and bolstered his reputation as an invincible leader. Napoleon used each victory to strengthen his public image, ensuring he was seen not only as a military commander but also as a stabilizing force capable of restoring France's glory. Yet, behind this carefully crafted facade, his ambition burned brighter. Being first consul was not enough. Napoleon aimed for more: the title of emperor. On December 2, 1804, in the grandeur of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself Emperor of France. By taking the crown from the Pope's hands and placing it on his own head, Napoleon symbolized his rejection of traditional authority and his determination to be seen as a leader beholden to no one. France had an emperor once again, but this time, he wasn't a hereditary monarch. He was a man who had earned his place through the blade of his sword and the weight of his decisions. The proclamation of the French Empire marked the beginning of an era of expansion and reform. Napoleon centralized power, creating a government that rewarded merit over birthright. For the first time, ordinary citizens could rise through the ranks based on their talents, a revolutionary idea in its day. However, the crown came with the immense responsibility of governing a vast empire and maintaining dominance across Europe. Napoleon quickly returned to the battlefield to counter the opposition from European powers unwilling to accept his rule. In 1805, he led the Grand Army in one of history's most brilliant engagements, the Battle of Austerlitz. Known as the Battle of the Three Emperors, Napoleon's forces crushed the combined armies of Austria and Russia, achieving a decisive victory that cemented his status as the greatest military strategist of his time. Yet the title of emperor brought its own challenges. As his empire expanded, he faced administrative issues, resistance from occupied territories, and growing hostility from his archrival, England. To counter this, Napoleon introduced the Continental System, an economic blockade designed to weaken Britain by cutting off its trade with Europe. Despite his achievements, this phase of Napoleon's life was also defined by controversial decisions. His boundless ambition and desire to dominate every corner of the continent led him to underestimate the limits of power. While the French Empire reached its zenith, the first cracks began to form. In the next chapter, we'll explore how Napoleon attempted to sustain his vast empire against a coalition of increasingly determined enemies. Like his empire, his story was far from over. At the dawn of the 19th century, Napoleon's grip on Europe seemed unshakable. His empire stretched from Spain to Poland, and his strategic alliances with vassal states solidified his position as the continent's most powerful man. This era of dominance was not only the result of his military genius but also his shrewd political maneuvering. Napoleon placed family members on key thrones to secure loyalty across his territories. His brother Joseph became King of Spain, and his brother-in-law Joachim Murat ruled Naples. These moves aimed to tighten his control and extend his political influence. However, his reliance on familial politics created internal tensions. Resistance to French rule grew, particularly in Spain and Germany, where occupied territories resented foreign domination. On the battlefield, Napoleon continued to showcase his mastery. Among his most notable campaigns were those against Prussia and Russia in 1806 and 1807, culminating in decisive victories at Jena Auerstedt and Friedland. These triumphs forced Russia to sign the Treaty of Tilsit, temporarily consolidating French supremacy in Europe and forging a fragile alliance between Napoleon and Tsar Alexander I. Yet Napoleon's dominance was not solely built on military might. He sought to impose a new order across Europe, introducing legal reforms through the Napoleonic Code. These reforms promoted equality before the law and abolished feudal privileges in occupied territories. While progressive, they were often seen as tools to reinforce French control. Even at the height of his power, tensions were mounting. Britain remained Napoleon's most unyielding adversary, its economy shielded by the might of the Royal Navy and resistant to the effects of the continental system. Simultaneously, uprisings in Spain and Portugal, backed by British forces, escalated. These revolts ignited the Peninsular War, a prolonged conflict that would become a significant drain on Napoleon's resources and a festering wound for the empire. As Napoleon enjoyed unparalleled power, his choices began to sow the seeds of his eventual downfall. Like all great empires, his was beginning to show signs of strain. In 1812, Napoleon launched one of history's most ambitious and catastrophic campaigns, the invasion of Russia. The relationship between Napoleon and Tsar Alexander I, once a strategic alliance, had rapidly soured. Russia's refusal to comply with the continental system and its challenge to French dominance prompted Napoleon to make a bold and risky decision: invade the vast Russian territory with a massive force known as the Grand Army, comprising over 600,000 soldiers. Napoleon anticipated a swift victory. His strategy was to defeat the Russian army in a series of decisive battles and force the Tsar to negotiate. However, the Russians adopted a different approach. They avoided direct confrontations and retreated, employing a scorched-earth tactic to deny the French any usable resources. The first major clash occurred at Borodino, a brutal battle where the Grand Army faced the Russian forces. While Napoleon emerged victorious, the losses were catastrophic for both sides. The Russians continued their retreat toward Moscow. When Napoleon finally arrived in the Russian capital, he found not triumph, but an empty, burning city, set ablaze by its own inhabitants to deny resources to the French. Stranded in hostile territory with a harsh winter looming and insufficient supplies, Napoleon was forced to order a retreat. This marked the beginning of a nightmare. During the grueling march back, the Grand Army was decimated by freezing temperatures, starvation, and relentless attacks from Russian guerrillas. Of the 600,000 soldiers who had set out on the campaign, only around 100,000 returned to France. The Russian campaign wasn't just a military failure, it dealt a devastating blow to Napoleon's reputation. Once feared as an unstoppable force, Napoleon was now seen by Europe as vulnerable, sparking a renewed coalition of Austria, Prussia, Russia, and England to challenge his dominance. This chapter reveals Napoleon's humanity, exposed by the enormity of the challenges he faced. But his spirit remained unbroken. In the next chapter, we'll explore how he tried to reclaim control against a united Europe, and how his brilliance, though diminished, still shone in his final years of glory. By 1813, the tide had turned decisively against Napoleon. The disastrous Russian campaign had shattered both his army and his image, and Europe's powers seized the chance to unite against him. At the Battle of Leipzig, famously known as the Battle of the Nations, Napoleon faced the combined forces of Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Sweden. Despite his valiant efforts, the overwhelming odds and betrayals by former allies sealed his defeat. Leipzig marked the beginning of the end. As Allied forces advanced into France, Napoleon launched desperate campaigns with the remnants of his once mighty Grand Army. Meanwhile, internal conditions in France deteriorated. Many of his supporters began to doubt his leadership, and the war-weary population longed for peace. In April 1814, Napoleon was forced to abdicate. He was exiled to the island of Elba, a tiny speck in the Mediterranean, where he retained a title and a small court. There, Napoleon reflected on his triumphs and failures, but his indomitable spirit remained. Less than a year later, he stunned the world by escaping Elba and returning to France, determined to reclaim his empire. Napoleon's return, known as the 100 Days, was one of history's most astonishing feats. Marching toward Paris without firing a shot, he rallied soldiers and citizens alike in a remarkable display of loyalty and admiration. For a fleeting moment, Napoleon regained control of France, rekindling the hopes of his followers. However, the European powers quickly united once more to oppose him. In June 1815, Napoleon faced his final confrontation on the fields of Belgium, the Battle of Waterloo. Despite his strategic brilliance, Napoleon encountered a determined enemy led by the Duke of Wellington and Prussian Field Marshal Blücher. Tactical errors, indecision, and the timely arrival of the Prussians sealed the outcome. The Grand Army, which had once dominated Europe, was decisively defeated. After Waterloo, Napoleon abdicated again, this time with no chance of return. He was exiled to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, where he spent the final 6 years of his life. Isolated from the world, he dictated his memoirs and reflected on his legacy, famously stating, "My true glory is not in the 40 battles I won, but in my civil code, which will endure forever." Napoleon died on May 5, 1821, at the age of 51. Yet, his impact on history remains profound. His ambition, genius, and legal and political reforms shaped modernity in ways that continue to be felt today. At the heart of Napoleon's life lay two driving forces: the visionary genius of a leader and the insatiable ambition of a conqueror. His story leaves us with a question: how far can one man go in his pursuit of glory, and what is the ultimate cost of greatness? Thank you for joining us on this journey into the past. If you were captivated by Napoleon's saga, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more epic stories. Share your thoughts in the comments. Was Napoleon a hero, a villain, or simply a man caught in the tide of history? See you in the next chapter of Warriors of the World.